All right. As a comedian would say, what a great crowd. Can everyone hear you? Me, I can hear you. Before I start, I want to say thank you to our sound engineers in the back, House of Bounce. They have a very, very difficult job in this space because the sound bounces around to and fro. So they are spectacular, but if you can't hear me, just let us know and they'll make some fine-tune adjustments. Also, if you want to do a rave, I'm sure that they're available for that. Good afternoon or evening. Welcome. My name is David Park. I am the director of the Hotchkiss Brain Institute, and it really is a pleasure to be here with you today for our first inaugural Together for MS event. So before we go on, my job is really to introduce the more important people, including some community members and the MC. But I first need to really take a moment to acknowledge the University of Calgary and its location in the heart of southern Alberta, to acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which include Blackfoot Confederacy, Kainai First Nations, Siksika and the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Good Stoney First Nations. We are also home to the Métis Nation within Alberta. So, thank you. Our MS Innovation Program is led by Dr. Sarah Morrow and Yong. It is really world-class, bridging scientific discovery with excellence in the clinic to answer critical questions about MS that will improve treatment and the quality of lives of people who have to live with MS. I am so incredibly proud of the work that the MS group does. It is truly a jewel within Canada and the world when it comes to MS. And you will hear from them today, and so thank all of the researchers who do and clinicians who do such a great job. Most importantly, I'd like to take a moment to thank our donor community. The donor community really helps accelerate our research. It's important because, of course, we get money from the federal government, but the donor community, philanthropy, allows us to take chances and move forward in a fashion that is much more rapid than traditional sources will allow. So the community is really, really important that way. And of course, we are lucky today to have a member of that community who's going to share her thoughts and experiences, Diana Joseph. Most importantly, before I introduce the MC, I'd like to thank all of you who are here to learn more about MS, to grill our researchers, to ask the difficult questions. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out here. It is a journey, we understand that, and we are greatly appreciative that you can do this. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce our MC for this event, Crystal Phillips. I've been in Calgary for a little over 7 years. Crystal, if you remember, was one of the first people in the community I ever met. And she told me her story. It was so inspiring. But Crystal has been like a jewel, a guiding light for me at the Hotchkiss and certainly for the MS community. She's done a number of things, but is currently for example, developed and birthed a branch out, but she is currently the senior director for the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, or OSIF, at Calgary Economic Development. So thank you for agreeing to MC tonight. So, Crystal, I hand it over to you.
Whoa, that was a nice intro. Thank you so much. It's crazy how quick 7 years goes. It's an honor to be here. I'm Crystal Phillips, and I'm going to be wearing actually a few hats tonight, as I am your MC throughout the evening. The first hat, and maybe the most important hat, is I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis back in 2005. So I think it's incredible to be a patient and see a community that is collaborating with the patient community, because often you go to research events, and I often feel like I'm the only MS patient in the room, and that's not a Hotchkiss Brain Institute event, obviously. It's other ones that I've been through my career. So this is really a cool and innovative opportunity for all of us tonight. So kudos to everyone who's put this together. The second hat that I'm going to be wearing is I started the Branch Out Neurological Foundation in 2010. I was inspired through my personal health journey to fill the gaps in the healthcare system. And I was so inspired that I started the Branch Out Foundation to literally branch out, fund a new field of study that focused on innovative research in neuroscience, stuff that was not typically funded and maybe considered too high risk. And I love being at this event and at the Hotchkiss Brain Institute because this is where the majority of our funding goes. I might be a little bit biased to Calgary, but I'm not the final decision maker on what is the best, most innovative neuroscience research in the country. I have a scientific review panel way smarter than me who determine that, and Calgary seems to still be at the top. So that's an incredible hat to wear. I still chair the board of this charity, and we just turned 15 on Sunday. Thank you. The third hat I wear is I started a venture capital fund because I wanted to ensure that there were opportunities that all of this hard-earned research and IP that's being developed in these research labs has an opportunity to move beyond research and into the hands of entrepreneurs who can create companies and solutions that can reach the community at scale. So that is my third, and my fourth one, as Dr. David Park mentioned, is I'm the Senior Director of the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, where we look at managing public dollars to invest in programs and companies that grow the economy in Calgary, and that includes upskilling talent in our city, attracting talent here, attracting and building companies here, and attracting investment and philanthropic dollars. So all of them are very relevant to all of the work that all of you do. So on behalf of all of those hats and organizations, thank you. Now, do what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm sorry I'm taking so long. First of all, thank you, Dr. David Park. As he mentioned, I've known him for a long time, and he is the leader, the fearless leader of literally one of the most innovative and globally recognized neuroscience research centers. That is impressive considering all of those incredible research centers that I've been able to visit in the last couple of decades. Now, enough about me. I'd like to just talk through about the flow of events for this evening. First, we get to hear from another longtime MS champion and donor, Diana Joseph. After that, we're going to have a moderated panel with leading research experts in MS. And after the panel and formal program, there will be more times to mingle with the researchers off stage, ask additional questions, and visit the trainee researcher posters and MS booths hosted by experts with more food and drink being served. So as you can see behind you, there are all of the research posters back there, and they like to be drilled with lots of hard questions. So I know that they can handle it because I've seen it before. So please enjoy their knowledge and learn from them. Lastly, if you would like to donate to the MS Innovation Program, or keep in the loop with the future updates, you'll notice that we've got 2 pamphlets on your table with 2 QR codes at the back. Take a look at them. There's opportunities to get on a mailing list, maybe participate in a research study, and of course to participate in other ways, whether it's donating or other events. Now, a quick notice that once the formal program begins, this will be recorded, and it will then be shared on social media channels. Finally, I would like to introduce Diana Joseph, the president of the Westman Charitable Foundation, and longtime champion in support of the MS program at the University of Calgary. Thank you, Diana, and welcome to the stage.
A little intimidating. Where do you start? Where do you start giving? Where do you start telling a 30-year-old story in 5 to 7 minutes? Last week, the U of C said to me, Diana, just tell your story. You got 5 to 7 minutes to summarize 3 decades of MS, philanthropy, and survival. And I said, 5 to 7 minutes. I said, perfect. And then they said, if you need more time, let us know. And I went, even better. And then the look of fear came into their eyes. But before I begin, a few ground rules. I may unintentionally and intentionally swear, offend, mix up dates, butcher names, and absolutely destroy a timeline. That's MS. And that's me, so let's buckle up. My stories is 3 generations of an MS story. My MS journey didn't begin when I was diagnosed at 33. It started long before. My mother, who I belovedly called Nanny, was diagnosed in her early 20s. I grew up watching her navigate a disease with no treatments, no support, and no options. And at the end, she spent the last 15 years of her life in a long-term care facility. 15 years. That was the reality of MS in her era: slow decline, loss of independence, and families trying to cope with almost nothing. Seeing that as a child wasn't just heartbreaking, it was absolutely terrifying, because I knew this could be my future also. My mother battled lupus, another autoimmune war. Then years later, my daughter Sarah was diagnosed with MS. Another big, oh yay moment. 3 generations and 3 diagnoses, a front row seat to MS. And now it doesn't have to do, okay, now I'm butchering it, I warned you. I have a front row seat to what MS can do and what it doesn't have to do anymore. When I was diagnosed at 33 with 2 young children, a thriving business, I had every fear you can imagine. Would I need a wheelchair? Would I end up in a long-term care? Would I raise my kids if I was hospitalized? Would I have to give up my business? Which, yes, I did eventually. And that was the reality back in the day. And that's when everyone knew. That's what we all knew, and that's what I knew. Then everything changed. I learned that right here in Calgary, something extraordinary was happening. I was being cared by some of the most brilliant minds in MS research anywhere in the world. Under the leadership of the world-renowned Dr. Yong, and yes, he truly is world-renowned, research was advancing at a pace that gave people like me something that we haven't had before: real hope. Besides him, Dr. Sarah Morrow, and a whole new generation following the lead of Dr. Luann Metz was creating a model where science and patient care worked hand in hand. They refused to accept the MS outcome as fixed, and they provided the future that could look different. The Calgary MS Clinic is where it all began. The MS Clinic at the University of Calgary was the first of its kind and a truly wraparound patient care, a bench-to-bed revolution. The silos between researchers and physicians just weren't cracked, they were obliterated. I watched the neurologists, researchers, psychiatrists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, bladder specialists, everyone working together in one place. And that's when we made our first major donation, because I looked and thought, this is where our dollars need to be. And boy, did those dollars work. And then the breakthrough came. The pace of research over the last 20 years has been absolutely astonishing. And I didn't just hear about the breakthroughs, I lived them. Real, measurable, life-changing progress. Not someday science, but right now science. That science that's changed my life, my daughter's life, and thousands of others. My nanny's wish, spending 15 years in a long-term care home, she wished one thing, that MS could be stopped. And that was her daily hope and her quiet prayer. And today that wish, her wish, is closer than it's ever been. Real discoveries are being made that are repairing damage, reversing symptoms, and restoring function. Things for generations were told were impossible. And these breakthroughs aren't just happening far away. They're happening right here at the University of Calgary and the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. This just wasn't Nanny's wish. This was the wish of the entire MS community. And now for the first time, it's truly becoming a reality. That's why we continue to give, because these wishes became results. My brother, the incredible, hardworking Jay Westman, and I supported this work because this family has lived with 3 generations. We've seen fear, but we've also seen the magic of progress. This isn't theory, this is impact. And let me tell you, the absolutely phenomenal ROI, the return on investment, when you're investing in real change, real outcomes, real people today. So where do you start? You start with collaboration, you start with compassion, you start with community. And tonight, you start by choosing to be part of the next chapter, the chapter where MS is no longer a sentence, but a solvable problem, where MS will finally stand for mystery solved. Thank you very much.
I don't know if anyone else timed it, but I saw 6:59 on my really well done. You didn't give yourself enough credit. Thank you so much, Diana. I know firsthand it's hard to share a personal journey, and it's also really, really important because we know we're not alone, and there's a lot of people that get inspired seeing other people put themselves out there and share these kinds of stories that we are all going through. Now, the next one is a great panel ahead of us. I'm going to introduce all of the panelists, and in Diana Joseph's style, I want to say first that as a non-neuroscientist, this is a bit of a tongue twister, even 20 years working in supporting neuroscientists when it comes to these accolades that I'm about to read off. So starting with our moderator, Dr. Shalina Ousman, professor at the Clinical Neurosciences Department and Cell Biology and Anatomy. Dr. Ousman has a PhD from McGill University and completed 2 postdoctoral fellowships at the Scripps Institute in Stanford University before joining the University of Calgary in 2008. Her research focuses on neuroimmunology of multiple sclerosis. I'll pause between each because it's actually like a wow every time you read each person's background. What an honor to be in front of everyone. Now, Dr. Yong, a world leader in neuroscience research and MS, he's the professor also in the Department of Clinical Neurosciences, co-lead of the MS Innovation Program, and co-director of Alberta MS Network. Also a personal friend and a longtime supporter of the Branch Out Foundation and advisor. Dr. Yong is a professor and founder of the Alberta MS Network, former president of the International Society of Neuroimmunology, and the co-director of America's and Global Schools of Neuroimmunology. His research on MS has advanced several areas, including drugs to slow disease activity and medications to promote brain repair, which is his current focus. Next up is Dr. Sarah Morrow, who's another panelist and professor of neurology, director of Calgary MS programs, and co-lead on the MS Innovation Program with Dr. Yong. Dr. Morrow received her MD from the University of Calgary, residency at Western University, and her fellowships at Jacobs Neurological Institute in Buffalo, New York. She joined the University of Calgary and Calgary MS Clinic in 2023 after starting the first MS Cognitive Clinic in Canada in London, Ontario. She sits on many international committees that drive MS treatment and standard of care initiatives. Dr. Morrow's main research interest is cognitive impairment and the impact, drumroll, cognitive changes on persons with MS. We have two more panelists. The next one is Dr. Hedwich Kuipers, she is an associate professor of neuroimmunology and co-director of Alberta MS Network. Dr. Kuipers has a PhD in immunology from Leiden University and did a postdoc at Stanford University before joining the MS Innovation Program at the University of Calgary as a faculty in 2018. Her research tries to understand the role that astrocytes play, that sounds like astronauts, that astrocytes play in the progression of MS, with an emphasis on how these brain cells shape the microenvironment inside MS lesions and are affected by it. Oh man, that's crazy. It's like a whole universe in there. Now, last panelist is Dr. Jodie Roberts, Assistant Professor of Neurology, MS Neurologist, and Clinical Data Scientist. Dr. Roberts is a neurologist practicing out of the South Health Campus MS Clinic and the Alberta Children's Hospital. She studies long-term MS outcomes and leads the Calgary MS Registry. She has a special interest in the social factors influencing MS outcomes as well as pediatric onset of MS. That is a great variety of expertise on the same disease. Obviously, it affects so many areas. So welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for this panel ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Together for MS event that we envision to mean connecting research, care, and lived experience. The panel session will last about 60 minutes. In the first half, I'll be asking the panel members questions related to the MS Innovation Program, the collaborative and innovative research and care that we're doing right here at the University of Calgary, unmet needs, and how this will guide the future in MS research and care. Importantly, the second half will involve questions from you being answered by the panel members. So I'm going to jump right into it so we can have enough time for your questions. So Dr. Yong, if you could give us a brief overview of what the MS Innovation Program is about and what the vision and goals are.
Sure. First of all, thank you all for coming out despite the weather. Really nice to see a full room. So the MS Innovation Program is our team of 9 research laboratories, 12 neurologists who see MS, and also allied expertise such as physiatry. Collectively as a team, we seek to improve the care of people living with MS. We seek to make new discoveries such as new treatments. And we are also embarking on our next frontier, which is trying to promote repair of the nervous system and also hopefully to elicit some degree of recovery. We are helped in this endeavor by a lot of trainees, many of which are manning the posters. Please interact with them. So we are hopeful for the future, and we hope to give you some hope as well on your way home.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Dr. Morrow, our program brings together clinicians, researchers, and people with lived experience. Can you relay how impactful that is?
Absolutely, thanks. That's a great question. I think it's important to put that in the context that I've only been in Calgary for 2 years, that I came here from another clinic. And one of the things that drew me here is exactly what you're describing, this joint endeavor of including clinicians, researchers, and patients when we're trying to move forward how we treat MS and how we research how we can better treat MS. I truly believe that this is the gold standard MS clinic in Canada. It's the reason I came here. And the ratio of neurologists to patients is quite high. We have amazing nurses. We have fantastic allied health, some great programs that are not offered anywhere else in Canada. And I also truly believe that you can't do good research without having good clinical care. So being able to come to a program where we have this amazing front-facing, patient-facing clinic, and yet behind that, we're also supported by so many researchers who allow us to put forward ideas, so we can come to you with ideas and say, what do you think about this? But we can also go the other way, where researchers, because we have such great collaboration as well as such great patient engagement, we can get researchers like yourselves in basic science coming to us and saying, what do you think of this new idea, and how can we perhaps integrate that into a clinical question?
Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Yong and Morrow, for explaining what the MS Innovation Program is about. And as was alluded earlier, we're doing some great things here in Calgary already. So I'd like to have the panel members explain a bit about what their individual research is. So I'll start with Dr. Kuipers.
Great, thank you so much for kind of that opportunity to shine a light on what we do here in these labs that are buried over there. And as Crystal already mentioned, I study astrocytes. And astrocytes are actually called astrocytes because they do look like stars. They look very cool, I must say, when you look at them, but that's not the only reason that I study them. So what we're actually trying to figure out is what happens inside the central nervous system. Because we know a lot about what the immune system does in the rest of our body, but we really want to find out what those mechanisms are that happen behind that blood-brain barrier, as we call it. So my research focuses on these astrocytes that can have in a healthy, unaffected brain can have very supportive roles. So they support neurons, they make sure that they're fed, that they're protected, they make sure that that barrier is really close. But in inflammation, such as we see in MS lesions, they can actually become very aggravated, and they can actually contribute to this destruction that goes on there. So on one hand, we try to understand how astrocytes do this, how they interact with the immune cells that come in MS, but also how we might actually change these astrocytes so that they're less provoking and maybe more reparative, so more protective. So we do that in various models, and we also try to find ways. So we try to find out what the astrocytes do, how and when, but we also try to find out how we can affect these astrocytes and make them actually more resting and more protective, either by therapies or by other ways of affecting astrocyte biology.
Thank you, Dr. Kuipers. And we'll move on to Dr. Roberts.
So I'm sort of the newest kid on the block. Just joined the research program and started my role as a staff neurologist just last August. And I was incredibly fortunate to take over the research program of Dr. Luann Metz, who I suspect many of you know. And back in 2002, Dr. Metz started the Calgary MS Registry, which is also known as SIMS. If you take a look at in your tables, there is a postcard including instructions for how you could join the registry. And so what a registry is, it's essentially a way for us to capture, the story, the long-term journey of people living with MS, so we can understand what MS looks like, over many decades outside of the span of clinical trials, to ask questions like, what really are the side effects and risks of a certain medication? Have all of our advancements over the past 10 years, has that actually changed the long-term outcomes of people living with MS? So it gives us the opportunity to ask those questions. And here in Calgary, where we're so lucky to, where clinical scientists and basic scientists work hand in hand, it also gives us a chance to collect data that people end up using and, to ask, scientific questions, either with MRI imaging or even, collecting blood samples and sharing those with basic science researchers. So it's a way to also find certain very specific people with very specific characteristics of their MS and merge them into other scientific studies. Now, in terms of my personal interests, one of the things that I've added since I joined on as the lead of the SIMS, or the Calgary MS Registry, is to ask the question, with these recent advancements in MS, is this care being delivered equitably? Does everyone have equal opportunity if they're at their first MS clinic appointment to be started on a new therapy? And is there, are there differences according to what someone looks like? What's their postal code? Where they were born? Are we delivering equal care for all? And that's something that's very important to me, and that's one of the directions we're taking SIMS in now. My other area of interest is in the transition of care from pediatric to adult neurology. I started a transition clinic at the Children's Hospital last year, which has truly just been very special, getting to know people, when they're still adolescents, and enjoying the fun environment at the Children's Hospital and bringing them over to our equally fun environment at South Health Campus. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Shalina.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And Dr. Morrow, can you share about your research?
Absolutely. So my main research interest is in cognitive impairment, as Crystal alluded to. It's nice now that it's such a talked about topic. I actually was at a dinner the other night and a neurologist said to me, but we know cognitive impairment is involved. We know cognition is involved in people with MS, and it's the first time I'd heard that said spontaneously by a non-MS expert, so it was really nice to hear. But it really is still an invisible symptom that is not always recognized both by the people living with MS. It's easy to say it was due to something else because we're all working, having kids, doing other things that distract you and think it could be from other things. It's also hard for other people in the family to understand sometimes because we understand if you need something to help you walk, but if you need extra time to think about the answer or to process the information, it's harder for other people to understand. And it also has a huge impact on quality of life and work. It's one of the most common reasons that people with MS actually leave the workforce or reduce their work hours. So I've really been trying to tailor my research as a clinician. I'm a clinician researcher about the clinical impacts, all those things I just talked about. So how can we identify cognition early? How can we change by intervening early? How can we ensure that our people with MS continue to have good relationships by ensuring that we identify it and talk to their family members about it? How can we make sure that our people living with MS are able to keep working, are able to keep doing all the things they want? So trying to see how cognition impacts day-to-day life and then coming up with ways to identify it and intervene early, often before it becomes too big of a problem, which is what my goal is. That's really been my focus of my research. You can't really do cognition without other invisible symptoms, so I have to say I also look in depression, anxiety, fatigue, because they all kind of come together in the same person. So I guess in summary, my main interest is cognition, but I do focus on all those invisible symptoms and how they impact the person living with MS.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. And Dr. Yong, can you tell us what your research is about?
Sure. Looking around the room, I see I'm the oldest guy. So what this means is, we have touched on many areas of MS research over the years, and we continue to do so. But one area that we have put a lot of attention on recently is the repair of lesions that are formed in the brain and in the spinal cord. And specifically, we are trying to restore the insulation that is lost from the wiring. So we're trying to promote remyelination. And to do that, we are looking into lifestyle factors such as exercise. We have described for the field that exercise promotes the repair of myelin. Others have corroborated those results. We are also looking at drugs that specifically can promote the cells that make the new insulation. And also, when a lesion forms, there are many inhibitors, that impediments to repair that one finds in those lesions. So we're trying to overcome those inhibitors, all in all, to try to promote remyelination. We think that remyelination, at least as shown in animal models of multiple sclerosis, can slow progression of disability and at best can restore some degree of lost deficits. So that's what we are aiming towards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your work that spans, as you can hear, a very broad area of MS disability, both at the biological level but at the comorbidity levels. So going beyond Calgary, so we've just heard that there's great research going here, but can you relay what you think are the most significant advances that have been made in MS research and care here at Calgary and beyond? And maybe I'll start with Dr. Young.
Sure. I think, been around MS research from having no treatment to many medications that are now approved for relapsing and now also for progressive MS. I think that has been the best advancement that I've seen over the years. We have more medications in multiple sclerosis than any other neurological problems. So I think the advances have been amazing, but I think the best example to highlight is the impact of our medications on reducing the number of relapses. And in fact, neurologist was just telling me the other day, I'm a scientist, so a neurologist was telling me that for a newly diagnosed, we usually don't worry so much about that anymore because we have many effective medications to reduce relapses. So that has been, I think, the best advance that I've seen.
Very exciting. Dr. Morrow, in the clinical field, what is some of the best advances you've seen?
So it's kind of, excuse me, it's kind of riding on the coattails of what Dr. Young said, in that the fact that we now have eliminated most of the relapsing biology associated with MS, so that inflammation that causes relapses or causes new lesions on the MRI, with the higher efficacy drugs or the high efficacy drugs we have now, we rarely see that. That has actually allowed us two things I think are really interesting. One is it's allowed us to see that something else is happening, because even though people are doing very well, these drugs have really kept our patients doing everything they want to do with their life, but it's showing us that they're still getting worse regardless, that there's something else happening. And that by really almost eliminating that inflammatory process, we're now able to see that there's something else going on that we need to address. And a lot of research here in Calgary and elsewhere is really focusing on that progression that's happening regardless of that inflammatory activity and how that impacts disability and what is the underlying driver of that at the basic science level, essentially, whether it's at the immune level, astrocytes, microglia, something else. The other is, with the treatments we've had now, we are now privileged to be dealing with people with MS who are older and aging. So similar to what Diana was saying earlier about the trajectory used to be that older people with MS would often be in long-term care facilities. We are now dealing with people with MS who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who you don't look disabled and able to still do so many things. And how do you balance that aging process with MS, and what is due to aging and what is due to MS? It's a huge question that I think we are now privileged to be able to address. So I feel like, although those are not advances, I feel like those are advances we can make because we can now address them, that have suppressed the inflammatory part of the disease.
Thank you. Dr. Roberts.
Honestly, one of my favorite research findings, I would say, in the last years, I get very excited about Dr. Yong's research about exercise and remyelination. Because, we're at the point now, as you were saying, Dr. Morrow, where often I meet people and I'm able to start them on effective treatment and say, you may not have any more lesions. So what should we do about the ones you have now? And I think brain health is so important for everyone, not just people living with MS. And there's some really interesting research out of Canada showing that, long-term health conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and other conditions can contribute to people with MS having higher levels of disability in the future. And so for me, especially because I see people on the pediatric side, it gives me, ammunition to say, hey, from day one, I want to talk about how can we help you live your life with a healthy brain, and how can I support you? And I guess, love the ammunition for those really exciting conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And Dr. Kuipers, tell us what you think are the significant advances.
I kind of want to highlight two things, one a bit more basic and one more translational, as we call it. As Dr. Yong already alluded to, I think we're really, really getting close to, we've been chipping away at that question of what drives that progression, right? We can deal with relapses pretty well, fortunately, and what is that extra piece that Dr. Morrow was pointing out? And we've been chipping away at it, and different groups have taken different angles and approaches, and you can see that now we're starting to get treatments that show some effect in progressive disease. So I think we're really at the cusp of getting there. I think we're going to get better at it. These treatments are going to get more effective and at slowing progression and maybe hopefully eventually stop it. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about is even though we're able to manage disease much better now, as Dr. Morrow already alluded to, there's still a lot of variation, right, in MS. You can have the same person or two people that look the same. They're the same sex, same age. They had MS were diagnosed around the same time, but one is in a wheelchair and the other isn't. So we're actually working together with a lot of different groups, both within Alberta and across Canada, and are trying to figure out what makes this difference. So one simple way is a repository that you might have collaborated with, which is the CanProCo, which is Canada-wide, and we have our own cohort here within Alberta as well, where we only take some blood. That's it. And then we can connect that with everything else that you also provide us about you, about your lifestyle, about where you live and what you eat. And there's different labs that do different things with these blood samples. So different really amazing scientists that have their own expertise. Some people look at all the proteins that are in there. Other people look at what kind of metabolites you can pick up from the bacteria that are in your gut. And we're gonna put all of that together. And because there's so many people in this database, we can now make maybe groups of people and say, like, you know what? There is this common factor that makes that your MS actually manifests itself more than your MS. And hopefully in that way, we try to understand that heterogeneity, that diversity in what MS looks like, and maybe we can have more personalized treatment in that way.
Thank you. I'm very excited about these advances because I used to work in a spinal cord injury field, and there's hundreds of millions of people with spinal cord injuries, and there's not a single medication, and not for the lack of research. And in a field like MS, there's over 20 disease-modifying therapies. So I think we're doing well, but we still have more to go. And so this brings me to my next question. These discoveries that have been described within Calgary and beyond have really changed what's possible in MS. But as you're all sitting here, we still haven't found a cure, and researchers are trying very hard worldwide on this. And people with MS still have daily challenges. So what are the unmet needs, and how will that guide and shape the future of MS research and care? And I'll start with you, Dr. Kuipers, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. And from a research point of view, I think an unmet need is that it's actually really tough studying MS in a dish or in a lab, right? Because preferably we would want to look inside the brain of a living person while they have MS, and we can't really do that. We have very talented people that allow us to use MRI to kind of generally see that there's something going on, but what exactly is going on is hard. So we need models, and as I said, like we really want to know what drives progression, and we still need to refine our models so that we can model progressive mechanisms either in a dish or in an animal or in some other system that is not a living human being. So I think that's a big need that we're trying to address, and then there's different ways that we can do that. So we can actually, we can use different organoid systems, for instance, or different mouse models are being redefined. And we can also still use the blood, for instance, of people with MS and try to figure out if we can see kind of signs of what's happening in the brain within that blood. So it is a need that is hopefully being met soon.
And maybe I'll tie in the lab folks together. Dr. Yong, if you could address unmet needs in research and what you think, how this will guide future research.
Yeah, for me, the most unmet need is trying to stop progression of disability. So despite the medications that we have that are very effective at stopping relapses, has been pointed out, there is still the silent progression that many of you, might feel and tell your neurologists about. So that silent progression, what's driving that progression of disability, that is a major unmet need. Along that line, though, there are a number of clues as to what type of plaques might be driving progression of disability, what kind of cells that have become dysfunctional that are more important in driving disability. So those are beginning to emerge as likely prospects, therefore opening up this whole new area of targeting those drivers of disability. So that for me is the major unmet need, but scientists worldwide and here are trying to work on that problem.
Thank you. And Dr. Morrow, if you can give us your perspective.
Of course. Obviously, I agree, but that both of those are definitely important, but I will put my own little spin on it. So for me, I think understanding why people with MS get cognitive impairment or other invisible symptoms is really an unmet need. We know it's due to the underlying MS biology because it happens in people with MS, but other than that, we actually have no specific target. So there's no one area of the brain, there's no one underlying pathology that we've found that leads to people having cognitive impairment. So you can have cognitive impairment associated with relapses, you can have cognition worsening associated with progression, and even with MRI studies, so we actually did a prospective study looking at people with relapses where cognition was involved. And even in that, when we MRI'd them at the time of their relapse, we still could not identify a specific lesion that led them to having those symptoms, which then means it's really hard to treat because you're really kind of just trying to borrow from other diseases or borrow from other parts of the MS treatment biology to say, well, maybe this will help, or maybe this will help. Without actually understanding why it happens, it's harder to target it. And most of the time we're ending working on the restore part rather than the repair part. And it would be nice to be able to do both with my patients who are having trouble with their cognition.
Thank you. And Dr. Roberts.
Unmet needs. I'm hoping that many people in this room will come and chat to us and answer this question for real, because I'm sure you all have opinions and ideas that we would benefit from. I actually want to take this chance of unmet needs to piggyback off something that Dr. Kuipers said, which is, there still seems to be distinct pockets of people living with MS where some people are more severe than others, and we really don't understand why. I think that's an incredibly important question because we've already branched off two conditions that we formerly called MS, would have been called MS 20 years ago, that are now called NMOSD and MOGAD. So, it is very possible that many people with MS might actually have something else, something that looks like MS. And so exactly what you're describing, I think, will probably lead us to discovering a few related but distinctly different from MS questions or conditions, and hopefully we'll get there.
This is great. Thank you very much. So before we go to your questions, I just wanted to end off with, if you had to name one thing that gives you hope for the future of MS research and care, what would it be? Dr. Kuipers.
Well, I think I already said it. I think we're getting there. I think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or the next generation of Dianas will stand up here and will reflect on, how bad it was now, 20 years ago, and how we're able to actually stop disease. I think we're getting there, and we are doing it because we're working together. We're joining forces, not only with amongst us, different scientists with different backgrounds, both basic and clinical, but also by hearing what matters to you and what actually impacts your lives. Like what should we be studying? Because you know what impacts your life and you know what you want us to address. So please let us know, and we will keep working together to stop MS.
Thank you. Dr. Roberts.
So back in 2019, that was my first chance that I had to work with Luann Metz, and she sent me to ECTRIMS, which is this big, sort of almost worldwide MS meeting that occurs every year in Europe. And so I walked into this meeting, and there was more people, more scientists at this meeting than people in the town that I grew up in. That many people that were excited and driven and wanting to answer the questions. And to me, it's just like the number of sheer, brilliant, interested, passionate people in this field is what gives me hope and brought me into this field. And I mean, even the sheer number of young people working in MS, even in Calgary, it's exciting. I mean, these, I have hope for us, but these are the scientists of the future, so.
Thank you. Dr. Morrow.
It's very similar to what Dr. Jodie said. Dr. Roberts said. My apologies. In that it's this kind of thing that gives me hope, right? That we have this many researchers who are coming here together to talk about our experience and seeing how passionate everyone is about it, seeing our students who are the future of our research and our fellows who are the future of MS care, and then seeing all of you who are coming and saying, I have MS and I want you to know I have MS and I want you to help, and how can we come together? So it tells me that we have so much potential here in Calgary because we have donors, we have researchers, we have patients, we have students all coming together to say, how can we make the lives of people with MS better? And that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. And Dr. Yong.
Well, I've been involved in MS research for 5 decades. No kidding, 5 decades. So I've seen a lot of progress. I think we are at the stage in which we can begin to think about repair, recovery. So that gives me hope. That is occurring. The research is occurring, and I think we can get there.
Well, thank you very much, panel members, for your insights. I hope that you have learned something from what we do and what's happening worldwide. But now we're going to switch the next half an hour to you. I know that there's 2 microphones, so if you want to raise your hand, someone will come and we'll direct your questions to one of the panel members. So just to get you, I know this can be intimidating, so I have some questions from online. So while you're thinking about your question, I'm just going to address this to either Sarah or Dr. Roberts. If someone is not doing well on one particular disease-modifying therapy, what is the procedure to try something new?
I mean, I guess the first question is, What do you mean by not doing well? If it's side effects, or if it's that it's felt that the treatment is not effective, they're still getting new lesions on their brain, or having new relapses?
I think they were saying relapses.
Okay, relapses. So I mean, it's a fairly complicated question, actually. It would depend, but thank you for giving that to me. So I guess the first procedure would be to talk about what medications they have and have not tried. You know, we are very lucky in Alberta now because we have a number of highly effective medications that are available. So sometimes it comes down to, you know, personal preference. Does someone want to take a pill? Would they prefer to do an injection at home, and is that more convenient? Do they want to go to an infusion center? And so sometimes it's those specific lifestyle things. But I'm not being entirely sure what that question is asking. I would say I hope that person feels empowered to speak to their neurologist, I guess, as a first step, and say, hey, I'm having new symptoms. You know, I'm concerned this isn't the right drug for me. What other options are there to explore? Because there are definitely options.
Hi, thank you for this. My question, I probably should direct it to Dr. Yong. I'm interested to know if you can be assessed for whether or not some of your myelin has been recovered. I do a lot of exercise after 10 years of not walking. I'm walking now. I can do stairs. I can do a tremendous amount of things. Thank you. So I guess, is there a way of being assessed that if my myelin has been recovered? I would also be interested to know how I can get into some of your studies.
Yeah, so very good question. How can you tell that repair is occurring within the brain? That is one of the important questions facing the field at the moment. While we have strategies, at least from preclinical animal models, to promote repair, and when we bring that into people, how can we tell that we have successfully repaired? The way to that question is to use imaging techniques such as MRIs to look at repair. And actually our group here, led by Dr. Zhang and also Dr. Metz, when prior to her retirement, did a study of a drug in which they specifically use MRI to see whether or not particular MRI techniques best objectively tell if some repair is occurring in the brain. So that also speaks to the expertise that is here, trying to not only bring drugs to the table, but also techniques to detect repair that is occurring. So that is still a moving field, but again, progress is being made. And I compliment you. I think you said that you are exercising and doing better. Exercise is not only good for physiological functions, but has effects within the brain itself. So keep it up.
Thank you. Do any other panel members want to add to that? Any other questions so far?
Please do not be shy.
I was just wondering if any of you have an opinion on continuing with, I'm on Gilenia for however long, and I'm obviously non-active, secondary progressive right now, so I continue to progress. Any opinion on continuing with like Gilenia or some of these, at Pat's point where at the point where I am at right now. Like, I've read some articles and studies to say, yeah, it's kind of pointless. Maybe you should stop at this point, given the negative consequences of whatever.
I'm going to field this one since I made Dr. Roberts field the last difficult question, because again, this is a difficult question because it depends on so many different things. Because you, as it was alluded to before, you and your MS are different from any other person with MS. It's sometimes the snowflake disease, right? There's no one who has two people who are the exact same. So I'll try to answer it in a bit of a general way in that, yes, there are times when you should stop disease-modifying therapies. There are times when you should consider a different risk-benefit ratio of a certain medication, because all of our medications have risks. There's no such thing as risk-free medication. So you have to balance the risk-benefit at that time, considering you as a whole person. So there are many times in the life of a person with MS where we would say, yes, now is the time to stop the drug, because we don't think the benefit you're getting outweighs the potential risk, okay? Then there is the other question of, when you're progressing, should you stop a medication? Because it's almost a slightly different question. And again, it becomes down to the individual person, because we know that earlier in the disease or in younger patients, even if you are showing that slow progression over time, you're still at risk of that inflammatory disease. And perhaps you're just not having relapses and new MRI lesions because Gilenya is doing its job. Or is it because you don't need Gilenya anymore? And that's sometimes a very difficult question to answer. So we often try to tailor it to you as who you are. So how long have you had MS? How quickly did things get worse? How have you been doing in the last few years? What is your age? Our immune system ages with the rest of us. So sometimes as we age, we don't need as strong of medications anymore. So I'm kind of giving you a non-answer, I realize that, but in some ways I'm hoping I'm giving you the information you're looking for. Is yes, there are times when we might say, you're right, it's time to stop your disease-modifying therapy, Gilenya. It might be, this is not the right drug for you at this time and we need to talk about another one. But it's rare that we say just because you're progressing, you should stop one of these drugs, because you may still be at risk of inflammation. I'm not saying we wouldn't say to stop it, it's just, it would never just be because you're progressing. And I'll just add the caveat that that's new. We've just learned this probably in the last 5, 8, 10 years. It used to be that as soon as someone showed progression, we'd be like, time to stop the disease-modifying therapy, it's doing nothing. And we've learned that's not true anymore. So it may also be that in 2-5 years, I would give you a different answer. So I hope that's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. So there's a question on to the left, and then one here, and then over to the right. Okay. So.
I have MS as well, and I struggle with my cognition fairly significantly, so I might struggle to remember what I'm trying to ask you or have my words come out properly, but I'm actually wondering about depression and MS, because I have heard there's quite a link between those two things. So like cognition, I'm wondering, do we know anything, is there like a biological factor when it comes to MS? And depression, and I'm also wondering about the link between, depression and cognition. So, is that a potential issue when we're thinking about cognition? And kind of like, what is the research saying, and is there some progress there?
It's like I planted that question. No, I'm kidding. So first, your first question. Yes, we are learning more and more about the fact that depression isn't just more common in people with MS because it's a grief, or they're dealing with disability, or they're dealing with changes in their life. Although in the past, it was always thought that that's why we saw more depression, because you were dealing with a disability or a diagnosis. More and more, we're realizing that depression occurs probably 2 to 3 times more frequently than in other neurological diseases, despite having sometimes the same level of disability, perhaps in different ways. So now we think that there is something about the underlying biology of MS, whatever is causing MS to get worse, that also increases the risk of depression. Similar to what I was saying earlier about cognition, we don't know why. So we don't fully understand what is happening at the cellular level or what is happening at the myelin level that is increasing that risk of depression. But we do think it has to do with the disease itself. It's not anything about not coping well or not knowing how to deal with disability. It truly is part of the disease. Okay. The second is about cognition and depression, and that's a big interest of mine, and it's been a bit hard to research. And part of the problem is that in people without MS, it's well known that depression leads to cognitive changes. And those cognitive changes are very similar to what you see in people with MS. So trouble with processing information, problems with that episodic memory, so remembering what someone told you yesterday as opposed to your coworker's name. It's that episodic memory and that planning and executive function, that kind of being able to see a problem and being able to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together to solve it. That's really common in people without MS, with depression. And those are the same symptoms we see with people with MS. So the assumption has always been that if depression causes those problems, then you must cause those same problems in people with MS, which we actually don't know. It's something that I think we should explore. Having said that, we often don't have good treatments for cognition. So I often will treat depression if they have both of them, MS depression and MS cognition issues, because I can't perhaps treat the cognition, but perhaps I can treat it by treating the depression, because if the depression is contributing, it may not be the whole reason, but if it's part of the reason, perhaps I can improve their quality of life. But it is something that I think we should be focusing on, because I think it might help us understand why people are getting depression and why people are getting cognitive impairment if we look at why the two interact and who responds to treatment and who does not, or who, when they have depression, gets trouble with their cognition and who does not. So the long answer is we don't know. The short answer is we don't know. The long answer is I think we should look into why that is. And it's a research question that's not garnered a lot of attention, shall we say. It's hard when you ask people about their own research. We don't know when to stop talking about it. So I'm going to stop now.
Morrow.
I could say lots more.
We have a question in the middle here.
Hi. So both my boyfriend and my best friend have MS, but their symptoms are very different. My boyfriend's had multiple full-body MRIs. He went, I believe he was diagnosed in 2017 and went from numbness to wheelchair within 5 years, and only has use of one hand. My best friend's never received a full body MRI, so I'm just wondering why some MS patients get the full body and some don't, and what significance do the lesions on the spine present?
I will field that question again. And I have to admit I missed a little bit because Dr. Roberts and I were talking. She has a bit of a chronic cough, so she's just going to take herself off the stage. No one wants to see them coughing. Okay. As I was alluding to earlier, there's no two people with the same MS. And without knowing both those cases in detail, it's hard for me to say why one went one way than the other. We do know that men tend to have more aggressive MS and tend not to recover as well from their relapses. So we do know, you're thinking of your boyfriend, perhaps he fell into that category where it was just more aggressive at onset, which is common in men. Again, not across the board, but when you look at averages, it's much more aggressive. And as I said, they don't recover as quickly. It may also have to do with when did you present with your first symptom? Some people present with their first symptom, and when you look at their MRI, already have a lot of MS damage. And so it may be by the time he came to our attention, he didn't have as much reserve because there's already been a lot of damage. And so then he can't recover as well. He can't repair as well, which is one of the things Dr. Yong's looking at. It's one of the reasons now that one of the ways we're trying to diagnose MS earlier is now you can diagnose MS without actually having any symptoms so that we can perhaps intervene earlier before we get to where your boyfriend is. Similarly, some people do really well. So some people repair really well. They recover, bounce back from their relapses, and we don't know why. Sometimes it has to do with where in the brain it happens. So back of the brain, brainstem relapses tend to be very severe, but recover really well. So those people who have double vision, trouble swallowing, trouble speaking, although it can look terrible at the time and feel terrible at the time, be very scary, they recover quite well. Whereas spinal cord relapses, where the biology is happening in the spinal cord, people don't tend to repair as well there. So that could be part of it. And that's why it's so important for us to be looking at this restore and repair, because even though we have great treatments, if the damage is already there, we want to be able to help those people as well. In terms of MRI differences, that could, it's hard to say because I don't know the cases individually. But I can say that our approach to MRIs has changed over time. So when I was training to become an MS specialist, it was 2007, 2008. And at that time, we were just starting to say that MRIs meant more than just a diagnosis. So the person I trained with was an older neurologist. Every time I'd order an MRI, he'd cancel it because he'd say, well, we don't need an MRI. They're already diagnosed, so what's it going to tell us? And we then started learning that actually silent MRI activity meant something, that it meant the patient could get worse and that the drug wasn't working. And so that's evolved over time, especially as we've developed better drugs. Similarly, we didn't think about imaging the MRI, we didn't think of imaging the spinal cord as much. Because if you think the spinal cord's like the size of a toonie at the top and like a loonie at the bottom, and we as an MS community said, well, they're never going to have a spinal cord lesion without having symptoms. It's just so small. So a lesion the same size in your brain or your spinal cord is never going to cause a problem you won't know about. And then as we started imaging the spine, we started realizing that that's not true. And so that's revolutionized practice too, that we now say we should be imaging this because new spinal cord lesions are just as important as new brain lesions, even if they don't cause problems. And then there's also this newer move, probably in the last 5 years, of what we call kind of rebaselining people. And that sounds silly, but you know, we don't assume that what happened 5 years ago is what's happening now. So if there's major changes or you're starting a new medication, we want to image, you know, a bunch of stuff so that we know where we're starting so we can monitor change over time. And that's also just a new thing. So we're all evolving as we go, and we all have different thresholds of when we feel how frequently they need to be done, or how, you know, whether you involve just brain or spinal cord. But that's probably the difference between the clinicians looking after the two patients you're talking about, and it also at the different time frames. Does that help? Okay.
Dr. Kuipers?
Yeah, can I just add, this is just quickly because we're going to go to another question and before we need to wrap up. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of the biological kind of thinking of this diversity that you see, right, between different people with MS. And as you gather, it's like we don't completely understand MS, right? And that is because there's probably, what we do think is that a lot of different things have to happen and have to come together for you to get MS. So that is, for instance, your immune system is a bit more responsive than somebody else's, or some cells in your brain are a little bit less regulated or kept in check. Or for some reason, damage that sometimes happens in your brain or in your spinal cord is not cleared as much. And then and all these things can be affected by your genetic makeup, what you eat, how you exercise, and they all come together, but in different ways, right? So one thing can be more prominent in one person than the other, and that might be why it looks different in one person from the other, and also why some people respond well to a treatment and others don't.
Thank you, Dr. Kuipers. There's a question to the right.
Hi, I was just wondering, because I'm sure a lot of us have seen a lot of misinformation on things like Facebook and gotten things from family members. What are the leading theories currently on the causes of MS? I know I participated in a study regarding domestic violence cases relating to MS. Have you guys, and that there's a link between autoimmune diseases and domestic violence or trauma, but what are currently the strongest leading theories on the cause, and how often, my second question is, how often do lesions grow after an initial flare-up?
I'll talk about it for a bit from a clinical point of view and then let my more basic science people answer, because we don't know. That's the basic answer. So far we can look at correlations, meaning we can look at if these two things happen, then it might be related. We don't have a good theory on a lot of causation. I'll touch on the domestic violence first, and then I'll come back to what we kind of know right now, to the best of our knowledge. So there was actually a poster at the ECTRIMS meeting that Dr. Roberts was talking about, looking at domestic violence and risk of MS. They were more looking at the risk of getting worse rather than the risk of developing MS, but certainly they did see that there was a relationship between the two. And why that is, we don't fully understand. Is it because those who are undergoing domestic violence aren't in their community as often, aren't seeking help as often, don't have that support? Or is it something more direct that the effect of the violence, whether it be physical or psychological, is changing the biology? And we don't know that. We do know that stressors can worsen MS, but there's many people who have stress whose MS does not get worse. There's a lot of people whose first MS attack comes on after a traumatic event, like a car accident or other things. We don't think the car accident caused their MS, it probably just unmasked it. They were already had MS, it just hadn't, reared its ugly head yet, shall we say. So that, in terms of the domestic violence, that's pretty much all we know right now. And when you look at stress overall, we do think very big stressing events are related to causing more activity or unmasking more activity, less so than that like chronic stress everyone has all the time, or some people have a lot of time. If you've got chronic stressors in your life, that seems to be less of a trigger for MS activity. But that's all from a clinical point of view. The things from a clinician, so when people ask me what causes MS and I talk in my clinic about it, I say the things we know about right now are mostly risk factors, meaning people who have this are high risk of getting MS and people who don't have this are at lower risk, but we have no true cause at this point. The only one where we probably have the most evidence is the Epstein-Barr virus, or the EBV virus, which is the one that causes mononucleosis, or the kissing disease that goes around. Not everyone who's been exposed to it gets that illness. You may have just been exposed to it and had a cold or a flu, or your immune system dealt with it and you didn't even know you saw it. But it seems to play a role in something with the immune system, but it's not enough, right? We call it's necessary but not sufficient. So there's many people who have been exposed to this virus who don't have MS. The other ones that we know play a role is vitamin D, which I think many people here know about, or are a big proponent of vitamin D therapy in Calgary. But again, we don't understand if taking vitamin D will change your course, nor do we know if taking vitamin D will prevent you from getting MS. We do look and we recommend that children take vitamin D, especially children of people with MS. But there's many who get lots of vitamin D as a child and don't go on to have MS. The other big role that's been found is obesity in childhood seems to increase the risk of MS. And we don't fully understand why. It probably has something to do with triggering the immune system. But again, it's not cause and effect, it's just an increased risk. And I think this comes back to we don't understand the biology of MS. So it's hard to make a case that this is the cause when none of them are perfect correlates. Like, it's not like you have this and you get MS, or you don't have this and you don't get MS. So that's what we know the best right now, but we're learning and we're changing how we research this and try to answer those questions based on the information we're getting. And that's where taking that clinical information and then bringing it back to the lab. So it's a perfect example of Dr. Roberts being able to look at a database and saying, there's lots of people who have MS who have this, taking it back to Dr. Kuipers or Dr. Yong and saying, could we investigate this at the cellular level and see if that's a risk? So I need to know when to stop. I will pass the mic over.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes. So there's a question.
I have a quick question, possibly. Is genetics still a risk correlate?
Would Dr. Yong or Kuipers want to address that?
Okay, I'm back. I'm really sorry, everyone. I have just a tickle in my throat, and I promise I'll go hang out at the Ask a Neurologist booth after this and make up for my absence in this session. So your question about whether there are genetic risk factors for MS. So kind of a general rule of thumb we say is, if you have MS, an immediate family member, so a parent or a child, would have about 3 in 100 chance of having MS. We know that there are certain families, where multiple generations in a row seem to have MS, and there might be something very unique about that genetic linkage. There's actually an amazing genetics researcher that just started at McGill, Dr. Adil Harood, that is doing some very interesting genetic studies, finding specific families that seem to have some sort of we call it an MS severity or loci. So there's something very specific about certain families that we don't quite understand, but it's a very active area of research. There definitely is a genetic component.
I actually am third generation MS, and I have 2 adult children, and I'm quite concerned about their situation, and I don't know what to do.
You know, as I hear this a lot from loving parents, people that are living with MS, the first question I often get is like, what can my family member do to reduce their risk? And some of that is the things that, Dr. Morrow touched on. So, we think there's some sort of role of vitamin D. So I do often suggest vitamin D supplementation. I don't know for sure that that does anything. I can't be sure, but there's a very low risk of harm, so I feel pretty comfortable recommending that. You mentioned your children are older. There seems to be some risk of childhood obesity. So to young parents, so that's good news. You're saying you're shaking your head. But we ultimately can't really know, except that the risk could be as low as 3 in 100. I understand it might be different for your family, and we also know that autoimmune conditions, for whatever reason, tend to cluster together, as we also heard described. It's very common that maybe someone doesn't have a family member with lupus or with MS, but they might have a family member with lupus or inflammatory bowel disease, and that's something I hope we're going to get to the bottom of in our lifespan. But I'm sorry, I can't say for sure about your children, but from your head nods, it sounds like they've decreased their risk where they can.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Pat. I've been with PPMS for 12 years. Tonight, I just want to share, I know I'm unique. Everybody in the room here is unique. We all have a different symptom and so on. I was listening to the gentleman there with his PPMS too, where he had drugs and everything. They gave me a lot of drugs, and one day I had enough because I thought it was making it worse. So I decided to forget about it, no drugs. Since that day, I've been better and better. And I think it's important to listen to our body, to what we can make it better. It's so important. And I thank you all at the front for all the work you do for us, MS patients. It's very appreciated, and we need that help and support. There's one more thing I want to add is diet is very, very important, and that's something it's not talked about enough. And we need to understand what the food is doing to our body, because I think at times it makes it worse. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And so you touched on a few important points, and one thing is, we have a lot of options first of all, for treatment of MS now, and so if someone is living on a treatment that causes side effects that makes their quality of life worse, that's definitely something worth talking to a neurologist about, because we have too many options for people to be living with treatment side effects. And second, I'm glad you brought it back to, my favorite topic, which is brain health in general. You're saying that, living a healthy life and taking care of your brain has improved things for you, and absolutely the science supports that as well. So that's excellent. Keep living that, your best life. And I agree that diet is important. It's just, it doesn't need to be any particular, the best diet is a diet that you can enjoy and you can keep up, for your lifespan. So I certainly don't support any fad diets, but, generally healthy diets, absolutely, that's so important. And we know that the microbiome, which is the makeup of the bacteria living in the gut, and we have a few researchers here at the university studying that. We know that somehow that influences how leaky the brain is and the pathogenesis of MS. So all great points. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This brings us to the end of this panel session. Thank you to the panel for your insight, and thank you so much for coming and participating. Please continue to engage with the MS Innovation Program, and you can do that tonight by speaking to our young scientists at their posters, or go to the booths and talk to a neurologist. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not quite finished yet.
Oh, test. it's okay. I was actually forgetting that I had another role. I was sitting in the audience and putting my patient hat on again. And I just wanted to say a few things. Is one, thank you for all the work that you're doing, and also to the audience members for asking those questions. It's really brave. They're really good. I learned a lot of new stuff. And one takeaway that is often a little bit challenging as an MS patient is the answer, and I'm interpreting, is the yes, no, maybe so. And sometimes as an MS patient, you're like, well, does that mean we're not learning anything? Does that mean that we're not advancing? What that means to me, in my experience of working in the health innovation sector for 2 decades, is it means that we are not looking at this as a single cause, as a single solution, that this is a multifactorial, complex disease. Otherwise, I'm sure we would have found the cure by now. Maybe I'm wrong. We're nodding. Okay, that's good. And it falls into that category of precision medicine, where we're looking not only at the disease, but we're humble enough to understand that we don't know all the answers in MS, and we don't know all the answers of the human brain. There's just so much to learn about it, and so we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves and turn a blind eye to all of the possibilities of what could help our brain and our brain health. So I really appreciated that very thoughtful reaction to these questions asked, because it's inspiring to know that this is how you're thinking with true infinite curiosity. The other hopeful thing that I heard, and I'm sure many of the patients in the crowd right now are not, well, we are patients, so it's not like we're anticipating that maybe we'll get MS. So when we hear repair and recovery, that is music to our ears. That is our love language as MS patients who have dealt with this disease for a long time. It means there's already damage, and sometimes you feel like there's less hope. But what I heard tonight is that there's a lot of room for hope, and that there's a lot of focus, and I can tell firsthand that a lot of money is being directed into this opportunity because there's so much progress. So thank you so much for giving us all a lot of hope and insights into this. Now, I am finished on the stage, but I will be here later. I will also be asking hard questions and learning about the science in the back. I hope you all do the same. And then I want to thank the panelists again for being here, our moderator. And then next I'll have Dr. Sarah Morrow stay on stage for some closing remarks. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. So I'm the only person standing between you and going to the Ask the Neurologist Brain Health or Brain Booster Fatigue and MS program. So I'll try to be quick. But I wanted to start by just saying thank you to Crystal Phillips for being our MC tonight. It was fantastic. It's always nice when, I'll stand in front of the mic, when we hear a personal story, and you are so inspiring in how well you've done with MS or despite MS. And I think it's such an inspiring story that for all of us to hear, especially as clinicians and other patients. Also, Dr. Shalina Ousman as our moderator tonight, and to all our panelists, Dr. Roberts, Dr. Kuipers, and Dr. Yong. I get inspired listening to what they have to say, so it's been great for me as well. And then, of course, thanks to Diana Joseph, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know in the 2 years since I've been here, and it's so nice to have such a champion of people living with MS and a champion for the MS Calgary program. So thank you for coming and sharing your story with us tonight. And of course, all our supporters of the MS program. I want to thank the HBI, the Cummings School of Medicine, and of course the research team who put up these amazing posters and organized this event. We could not have done this without you. This takes a lot more work than you would think, and there's so many people involved that made this happen. And it's so great to see all of you here so we can appreciate the work they put into this. I want to highlight, I mentioned already, please take some time to go and look at the posters. Our students have some amazing work that they can share with you. We have booths at the back that has to do with our clinical program and what we have to offer. As I said, I do think this is the gold standard MS clinic in Canada. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. There's cards on your table. Sign up to be a part of research, to just get our newsletter, to just consent to be contacted if we have research that might fit with what you do. And keep it out an email for a follow-up email. Keep your eye out for a follow-up email just to talk about our program and any questions you may have. But please make sure to stay and mingle, go around, meet other people with MS, meet the research, meet our clinicians. And then, of course, lastly, if anything you heard today resonates with you, please consider making a gift to the MS Foundation program. It's really the way we keep this going is through our donors and our supporters that we're able to do the great research we're doing here in Calgary. So thank you, everyone.